Game of Thrones isn't just a story about political backstabbing and dragons, it's a world that once had technology so advanced they make our modern achievements look primitive by comparison. What most fans don't realize is that Westeros isn't in the Middle Ages. It's in a dark age, the shadow of a fallen, far more advanced civilization. Today, I'm breaking down the 8 most mind-blowing lost technologies from the world of Game of Thrones that prove the Seven Kingdoms are living in the ruins of what was once a far more advanced world. And when you learn about lost technology number 5, you'll understand why some Maesters might be deliberately keeping Westeros in the Dark Ages. Before we dive into these lost technologies, we need to understand something crucial about the world of Game of Thrones. It's not progressing forward like our world, it's regressing. The Westeros we see in the show is technologically and culturally inferior to what existed thousands of years earlier. George R.R. Martin deliberately created a world where knowledge has been lost rather than gained over time. The greatest achievements, from architecture to metallurgy to magic, are ancient, with modern Westerosi often unable to replicate what their ancestors created. I've analyzed the complete history of the Seven Kingdoms to identify the 8 most significant technologies that have been lost or diminished by the time of Game of Thrones. These aren't just fantasy elements, they're crucial pieces of world building that explain why Westeros is stuck in a seemingly endless medieval period. So let's explore the 8 most incredible lost technologies from the world of Game of Thrones, and what their loss tells us about this fascinating universe. Valyrian Steel, the lost art of magical metallurgy. Valyrian Steel is perhaps the most famous lost technology in Game of Thrones. These legendary blades are lighter, stronger, and hold an edge better than any conventional steel. They're also one of the few materials that can kill White Walkers, making them not just superior weapons, but potentially world-saving artifacts. What makes Valyrian Steel truly remarkable is that no one in the current era knows how to create it. The secret died with the doom of Valyria about 400 years before the events of Game of Thrones. The Valyrians took their metallurgical secrets to their graves when their civilization was destroyed in a single day. We know that creating Valyrian steel involved both advanced metallurgy and blood magic. The steel was forged with Dragonfire, but that alone wasn't enough. There were spells and sacrifices involved that no modern smith understands. Even Topo Mott, one of the few smiths who can rework existing Valyrian steel, admits he doesn't fully comprehend the material he's working with. This creates a fascinating economic reality in Westeros. There is a fixed, dwindling supply of Valyrian steel weapons. Each one lost is irreplaceable, making them priceless heirlooms passed down through noble families. House Stark's ancestral sword Ice, House Mormont's Longclaw, later given to Jon Snow, and the Lannister sword Brightroar, lost on an expedition to Valyria, are all examples of these precious artifacts. What's particularly interesting is that the decline of Valyrian steel mirrors the decline of magic in the world. As dragons disappeared and magical knowledge was lost, the ability to create these weapons vanished as well. When dragons return to the world with Daenerys, we see other magical elements strengthening too, suggesting a connection between these forces. The brutal truth is that Valyrian steel represents something fundamental about the world of Game of Thrones. It's a world where the greatest achievements are in the past, with the present being a pale shadow of former glory. Modern Westerosi can only use, and occasionally repurpose, the masterpieces created by their ancestors, unable to match their achievements. The Wall, ancient magical engineering. The Wall is so omnipresent in Game of Thrones that it's easy to forget what an extraordinary feat of engineering it represents. Standing 700 feet tall and stretching for 300 miles across the northern border of the Seven Kingdoms, it's a structure that dwarfs anything built in our real-world ancient or medieval periods. What's crucial to understand is that the Wall isn't just physically impossible by medieval standards, it's magically enhanced. Brandon the Builder, the legendary founder of House Stark, supposedly raised the Wall with the help of giants and the Children of the Forest about 8,000 years before the events of the show. The Wall contains spells and enchantments, old magic and deads as the wildlings call it, woven into its ice that prevent the dead from passing through. By the time of Game of Thrones, no one could create anything remotely comparable. The Night's Watch doesn't build new sections of the Wall, they merely maintain what already exists. When sections need repair, they can only add to the existing structure rather than recreating it from scratch. This magical engineering extends beyond just the wall itself. The complex system of tunnels, gates, and fortifications along its length represents knowledge that has been partially or completely lost. Castle Black, the Shadow Tower, and Eastwatch by the Sea are all ancient structures that the modern Night's Watch struggles to maintain, let alone replicate. What makes the wall particularly fascinating as a lost technology is that it represents a collaboration between different species and different types of knowledge. Humans, giants, and the children of the forest all contributed their unique skills to its creation. By the time of the show, such collaboration is unthinkable. The giants are nearly extinct, the children are believed to be completely gone, and humans have lost much of their ancient knowledge. The wall's destruction in the Season 7 finale, when the Night King uses the undead Viserion to breach it, is symbolically powerful precisely because it represents the destruction of something irreplaceable. Even if the White Walkers are defeated, the wall as it was can never be rebuilt. The knowledge and magic required are simply gone from the world. Dragonbinding, controlling the ultimate weapon. Dragons are the nuclear weapons of the Game of Thrones world, massively destructive forces that completely change the balance of power. But what most fans don't realize is that the ability to control dragons was once a much more sophisticated technology than what we see with Daenerys. The Valyrians had developed a complex system of spells, horns, and blood magic that allowed them to bind dragons to their will. This wasn't just the natural affinity that Targaryens seem to have for dragons. It was a deliberate, systematic technology for dominating these powerful creatures. The most concrete example of this lost technology is the dragon-binding horn that appears in the books. Euron Greyjoy claims to possess such a horn, which he calls Dragonbinder. The horn is massive, shiny black, and banded with red gold and Valyrian steel. It bears the inscription, "I am Dragonbinder. No mortal man shall sound me and live." When the horn is blown at the King's Moot, the man who sounds it dies with charred lungs, a blood sacrifice that activates its power. This suggests that Valyrian dragonbinding wasn't just about forming a bond with dragons, it was about dominating them through blood magic, potentially against their will. By contrast, Daenerys' connection to her dragons is more intuitive and less controlled. She forms a natural bond with Drogon, but struggles to control all three dragons as they grow. She can't prevent Drogon from killing a child in Meereen, and eventually has to chain Rhaegal and Viserion beneath the pyramid because she can't control them. What makes this particularly interesting is that it suggests the Targaryens, despite their dragon-riding abilities, actually preserved only a fraction of Valyria's dragon-related knowledge. They maintained enough to ride dragons but lost the deeper, more complex technologies that gave the Valyrians their true power. This pattern of partial preservation is common throughout the world of Game of Thrones. Fragments of ancient knowledge survive, but the complete systems and contexts are lost. It's like having a single component of a computer without understanding the operating system or power supply needed to make it work. Wildfire, the ancient weapon of mass destruction. Wildfire is one of the few ancient technologies that remains somewhat functional in the Game of Thrones era, but even it represents a shadow of its former potency. This volatile, green-burning substance is essentially Greek fire on steroids. It burns hotter than regular fire, can't be extinguished with water, and continues burning even on water. The Alchemists Guild, also called the Pyromancers, are the keepers of the Wildfire secrets. Once a powerful order, by the time of the show they've been reduced to a small, somewhat disreputable group operating from beneath the streets of King's Landing. What's fascinating about Wildfire is that its potency is directly tied to the presence of magic in the world. Hallyne the Pyromancer tells Tyrion that their spells have been working better since the dragons returned, and they've been producing wildfire more quickly and of higher quality. This suggests that wildfire was never just a chemical compound. It was a magical technology that waxed and waned with the overall level of magic in the world. The use of wildfire in the show demonstrates both its power and how poorly understood it is by the current era. Cersei's destruction of the Sept of Baelor shows its devastating potential, but also the recklessness of those who use it. The Mad King's plan to burn them all by igniting caches throughout King's Landing reveals how wildfire had become a tool of last resort rather than a controlled strategic weapon. In the books, there are hints that the ancient Valyrians may have used wildfire or something similar as part of their technological arsenal, alongside dragons and other magical tools. By the time of Game of Thrones, it's been reduced to a dangerous, unpredictable weapon rather than a sophisticated technology. What makes wildfire particularly interesting as a lost technology is that it represents knowledge that has degraded rather than disappeared entirely. The Pyromancers still know how to make it, but they don't fully understand it or control it as their predecessors did. It's like having the formula for gunpowder without understanding ballistics or controlled explosions, dangerous knowledge without the context that makes it truly useful. The Citadel's hidden knowledge suppressed technologies. One of the most controversial aspects of lost technology in Game of Thrones is the possibility that some knowledge hasn't been accidentally lost. it's been deliberately suppressed. The Citadel, where Maesters are trained, may be actively preventing certain technologies from being rediscovered or widely used. Archmeister Marwyn, one of the few Maesters who studies magic, explicitly tells Samwell Tarly, "Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? Gallant dragon slayers armed with swords? The world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons." This suggests a deliberate policy of suppressing magical knowledge in favor of a world governed by predictable natural laws. A world where the Citadel's scientific knowledge gives them power, rather than one where dragon riders and sorcerers rule through magical means. Evidence for this suppression can be seen in how the Citadel treats magical subjects. Maesters who study magic are marginalized, like Marwyn or Lewin. The glass candles, obsidian artifacts that allow users to see across vast distances and potentially communicate telepathically, are kept hidden away, their use discouraged. The Maesters chain itself symbolizes this control of knowledge. Each link represents mastery of a different field, but Valyrian Steel links for the study of magic are extremely rare. Most Maesters are taught that magic, if it ever existed at all, is gone from the world, despite evidence to the contrary. What makes this particularly disturbing is that the Maesters serve as advisors to every major lord in Westeros. They deliver messages, provide medical care, and offer counsel, giving them enormous influence over the flow of information and the development of technology throughout the Seven Kingdoms. If the Citadel is indeed suppressing certain types of knowledge, it represents a different kind of lost technology, one that's been deliberately hidden rather than forgotten. This raises profound questions about power and progress in the world of Game of Thrones. Are the Maesters keeping Westeros technologically stagnant to maintain their own influence? Is their suppression of magical knowledge partly responsible for the realm's vulnerability to threats like the White Walkers? This conspiracy theory about the Citadel is never fully confirmed in the show, but the books provide enough evidence to make it a compelling possibility, and one that fundamentally changes how we view the technological stagnation of Westeros. Ancient architecture, impossible structures. Throughout Game of Thrones, characters encounter structures that modern Westerosi simply couldn't build. These architectural marvels aren't just bigger or more beautiful than contemporary buildings, they're fundamentally beyond the engineering capabilities of the current era. The most obvious example is the Wall, which we've already discussed, but there are many others. Winterfell was built around hot springs with a sophisticated system of pipes running through the walls to distribute heat, a form of central heating that doesn't exist elsewhere in the Seven Kingdoms. The first keep, the oldest part of Winterfell, is a massive round drum tower that modern builders couldn't replicate. Storm's End features walls allegedly infused with magic spells that make them impervious to storms and siege. The base of the high tower in Old Town is made of a mysterious black stone that appears oily and doesn't match any known material. Harrenhal, though built relatively recently, is on a scale so massive that it can't be properly maintained, with towers that seem to defy the laws of physics. Perhaps most impressive are the Valyrian roads, massive highways of fused stone that still connect the former Valyrian colonies in Essos. These roads have no joints or seams. They're single pieces of stone that have somehow been melted and shaped into perfect roads that haven't cracked or buckled in 400 years. What makes these structures particularly fascinating is that they represent different lost architectural traditions. The Wall and Winterfell embody the lost knowledge of the First Men and possibly the Children of the Forest. Storm's End represents the lost art of storm magic. The Valyrian roads showcase the lost Valyrian techniques for manipulating stone with dragonfire and spells. By the time of Game of Thrones, builders are reduced to maintaining these ancient wonders rather than creating new ones. When parts of these structures are damaged, like the burning of Winterfell, the replacements are invariably inferior to the originals. This architectural decline perfectly encapsulates the technological regression of Westeros. The greatest buildings are the oldest, with each successive generation producing less impressive structures. It's the opposite of our world, where architectural capabilities generally improve over time, with modern skyscrapers dwarfing ancient monuments. Warging and Greensight, lost mental technologies. Not all lost technologies in Game of Thrones are physical. Some are mental or magical abilities that have faded from common use. Warging, the ability to enter the mind of an animal and control it, and Greensight, prophetic visions and the ability to see through weirwood trees, represent sophisticated mental technologies that were once more widespread. In the ancient past, these abilities were common among the Children of the Forest and some First Men. By the time of the show, they're incredibly rare, with Bran Stark, Jojen Reed, and a few wildlings beyond the wall being among the only known practitioners. What makes these abilities technological rather than simply magical is that they could be trained and developed systematically. The Three-Eyed Raven teaches Bran specific techniques to control and direct his warging and green sight. There are rules, limitations, and methods to these practices, hallmarks of a technology rather than random magical gifts. The decline of these abilities coincides with the retreat of the Children of the Forest and the spread of Andal culture, which rejected such primitive practices in favor of the Faith of the Seven. The Citadel's skepticism toward magic likely accelerated this decline, as knowledge of how to identify and train potential wargs and greenseers was lost or suppressed. By the time Bran begins developing his abilities, there's only one teacher left in the world, the Three-Eyed Raven, who has extended his life far beyond normal human limits, specifically to pass on this knowledge before it disappears completely. What makes the near extinction of warging and green sight particularly significant is that these abilities could have been crucial in the fight against the White Walkers. The ability to scout through animals, communicate across vast distances, and see enemy movements would provide an enormous strategic advantage. Yet this technology has been so thoroughly lost that even when it reappears in Bran, most of Westeros doesn't believe it exists or understand its potential. This represents another way in which Westeros has become vulnerable through the loss of its ancient knowledge. Abilities that could protect the realm have been forgotten or dismissed as superstition, leaving humanity less equipped to face supernatural threats. Faceless Men Techniques, Identity Alteration Technology. The Faceless Men of Braavos possess perhaps the most advanced technology still functioning in the world of Game of Thrones, the ability to perfectly change their appearance by wearing the faces of the dead. This isn't simple disguise, it's a complete physical transformation that's indistinguishable from reality. What makes this a technology rather than just magic is that it involves specific techniques, tools, and training. We see in Arya's training that there's a systematic process to preparing faces, preserving them, and learning to wear them effectively. The Hall of Faces beneath the House of Black and White contains thousands of preserved faces, organized and maintained like a library of identities. The origins of this technology are shrouded in mystery, but it's suggested that the first faceless men were slaves in the Valyrian mines who developed these techniques as a way to move undetected among their masters. If true, this would make it one of the few advanced technologies not developed by a dominant civilization, but by those oppressed by it, a form of resistance technology. What's particularly interesting about the Faceless Men's techniques is that they've managed to preserve and systematize their knowledge while most other magical arts have declined. They've created an institution, the House of Black and White, specifically designed to maintain and pass on their techniques across generations. This institutional preservation stands in stark contrast to how other magical knowledge has been lost in Westeros. Without the Citadel equivalent for magical arts, most supernatural techniques have been passed down through increasingly diluted oral traditions or lost entirely when practitioners died without apprentices. The Faceless Men's success in preserving their techniques raises an important question about lost technology in the world of Game of Thrones. Perhaps the issue isn't that magical knowledge can't be preserved, but that most cultures haven't created the institutions necessary to maintain it. The Faceless Men, with their rigid hierarchy, careful training, and dedicated facility, show that even in a world where magic is fading, specific techniques can be maintained if the right structures are in place. This makes the loss of other technologies all the more tragic. With proper institutions, perhaps Valyrian Steel production, Dragonbinding, or other lost arts could have been preserved as well. These 8 lost technologies reveal something profound about the world of Game of Thrones. It's a civilization in decline, living among the ruins and remnants of greater achievements from the past. Unlike our world, where technology generally progresses forward, Westeros has been moving backward for thousands of years. This technological regression shapes everything about the story we see. The political struggles for power take place against a backdrop of fading knowledge and diminishing capabilities. The threats facing the realm, particularly the White Walkers, are more dangerous precisely because the technologies that once might have easily defeated them have been lost or forgotten. What makes this particularly tragic is that many characters don't even realize what's been lost. They view their world as normal rather than diminished. Only a few, like Tyrion with his fascination for dragons, or Sam with his hunger for forbidden knowledge, seem to grasp how much has slipped away over the centuries. This pattern of loss raises disturbing questions about the future of Westeros. If the trend continues, what further knowledge might disappear? Will the technologies showcased in Game of Thrones, like Wildfire or the glass candles, be completely forgotten a few centuries later? Is Westeros trapped in an irreversible downward spiral, or could the return of dragons and magic signal a potential renaissance? The story of Game of Thrones can be read as a warning about the fragility of knowledge and the danger of taking progress for granted. Technologies that seem permanent can be lost through catastrophe, suppression, or simple neglect. What took generations to develop can disappear in a single lifetime if not properly preserved and passed on. If you enjoyed this breakdown of lost technologies in Game of Thrones, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which lost technology you find most fascinating or which you think would be most valuable to rediscover. This is Explainified, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the lost technologies of Westeros. If you want to learn more about the ancient history that shaped Game of Thrones, check out my video on the Age of Heroes and the Long Night, which I'll link right here. And don't forget to subscribe for more Game of Thrones explained videos coming every week. This is Explainified, and I'll see you in the next one.